All right, you guys, we're going to jump right into this with no introduction. There's a lot that I would like to speak with you guys about. Can't wait to hear your feedback. A lot of lies that are being put out there, narratives that I would say are half-truths or just misrepresentations entirely. And I don't really see the reason for that. First and foremost, to let you know, last week was not a dream. Charlie Kirk, my friend, is dead. And he was publicly executed. I want to make that clear. Charlie Kirk was publicly executed before the world.
Everyone was shocked, emotional, and grieving for her loss. But in the blink of an eye, Candace Owens set social media on fire. A single statement from her sent shockwaves through the political world and ignited a frenzy online. For days, the public saw Erica, Charlie Kirk's wife, as a heartbroken widow, her face marked by sorrow. But suddenly, Candace flipped that image upside down. She insisted something in the story didn't quite add up. And this time, she wasn't holding back. Candace began pointing out details that, according to her, most people were too afraid to say out loud. She didn't sugarcoat her words. Every phrase hit like a spark in dry grass. And though no official evidence ever confirmed her claims, the internet erupted. The conversation shifted, no longer about a faceless figure in the crowd, but about unverified rumors that someone close to Charlie might know more than they had revealed. Soon, social media was flooded with speculation, theories, and debates. People began dissecting timelines, zooming in on inconsistencies, and questioning motives whispered across forums. Candace's open challenge to the official version of events poured fuel on the fire of doubt, making millions ask, is there something deeper beneath this grief? What started as a mystery had now evolved into something else entirely. A maze of suspicion where every word and gesture was analyzed through the lens of distrust. Social media became a battleground of hashtags, emotions, and clashing opinions. And then, in the midst of the chaos, one haunting phrase echoed through the noise. I forgive him. Those three words, simple, chilling, and strange, became the spark for another wave of online debate. Some saw it as an act of faith. Others believed it carried a deeper, unspoken meaning. Either way, the consequences were undeniable. A private tragedy had become a public storm, and the emotional fallout was far from over. Every reaction, every post, every video seemed to pull the story deeper into the eye of a digital hurricane. We've witnessed explosive online debates, jobs lost, students suspended, and communities torn apart over opinions about this tragedy. But then, out of nowhere, came a twist no one saw coming. The kind of twist that stops the internet cold. On discussion boards and forums, unverified rumors began to surface. Whispers suggesting that even though police already had a suspect, another name was quietly slipping into the conversation. And that name shocked everyone. Charlie's wife, the woman the world had seen mourning in silence, her face etched with grief, was suddenly being pulled into an online storm of speculation. No one accused her outright, but the internet was buzzing. Could it be true? Or was this just the chaos of grief turning into digital hysteria? Almost instantly, social media exploded. Timelines flooded with posts, hashtags, and endless theories. Some defended her with compassion, others demanded answers. The divide was brutal. The louder the debate grew, the more desperate everyone became for the truth. Then, Candace Owens entered the storm. When she saw the whispers spreading online, Candace didn't stay silent. She detonated across social media like a media shockwave. On September 18th, she posted a story that left millions stunned. Her message was blunt. Important details were being hidden about Charlie Kirk's death. Within seconds, the narrative flipped. And then, she did something no one expected. Candace quoted a line from Scripture, the words of the man on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." She repeated the haunting phrase, "I forgive him," linking it directly to Charlie's final moments. For Candace, this was no longer just tragedy. She framed it as a moment filled with unanswered questions, perhaps even a larger pattern of silence. She positioned herself not as a mere commentator, but as a citizen investigator, calling on her millions of followers to come forward, to share what they'd seen or heard.
My friend gets shot in the neck. Yeah, that's what happened. I just want to say that he was publicly executed again before the world. The question is why, right?
And just when it seemed the internet couldn't take more, the story took another eerie turn. Candace claimed a group of students at Utah Valley University had sent her a photograph, one they believed might hold a hidden clue connected to the tragedy. That single detail set off another chain reaction online. Threads multiplied, screenshots spread, speculation reached a fever pitch. The photo they sent, they claimed, might be connected to the shocking incident. And in that instant, it was as if a digital bomb had gone off. The internet erupted once again, faster, louder, and more chaotic than before. Comment sections flooded, hashtags trended overnight, and speculation took on a life of its own. Candace, never one to stay quiet in the storm, leaned all the way in. She picked up a new theory circulating on Xnet, one so bold it instantly split the audience in two. According to online chatter, just an hour after Charlie Kirk's death, a private jet took off from Provo. And what set social media ablaze was one particular claim, that the plane allegedly turned off its transponder mid-flight. Aviation experts online quickly weighed in, noting that such an act was extremely unusual. Within hours, timelines filled with side-by-side comparisons, screenshots of flight trackers, and heated debates. Was the signal loss just a random glitch or something more complex? No one knew, but everyone had an opinion. Candace posted about it repeatedly. On Instagram, she amplified the theory, pointing out that commercial jets rarely disable their transponders. She even mentioned receiving a message from someone who claimed to work in aviation, calling the move highly irregular. The result? Pure internet chaos. Theories multiplied, threads spiraled, the story spread like wildfire across platforms. Supporters praised Candace as the only one bold enough to ask the questions mainstream media wouldn't touch. Critics, on the other hand, accused her of exploiting grief for engagement, turning heartbreak into headline material. And just when it seemed the narrative couldn't twist any further, it did. New online discussions began surfacing, suggesting that investigators might be paying closer attention to Charlie's inner circle. Among the unverified chatter was a new, unconfirmed rumor, one that centered around Erica Kirk, his wife. Commentators noted that after the tragedy, Erica abruptly disappeared from social media, a sharp contrast to her previously active presence. When she finally reappeared, her demeanor caught public attention.
That young man. On the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him.
Others described it as eerily detached. Discussion boards filled with contrasting reactions, empathy, confusion, and even doubt, as the internet dissected every gesture, every word, every pause. A simple phrase had become a lightning rod, sparking questions not about guilt or innocence, but about emotion, authenticity, and how grief looks in the public eye. Her tone, some said, felt strangely distant, a kind of calm that didn't match the chaos surrounding her. It wasn't anger or denial, it was emotional distance, the kind that left people uneasy. And just as the internet began dissecting her every word, unverified rumors started to swirl. Whispers about financial strain, about quiet disagreements within the family. None of it confirmed, none of it proven. But it was enough to send speculation skyrocketing across social media like fireworks. Soon, the conversation took on a life of its own. Was Erica simply a grieving widow staying composed under pressure? Or was the public projecting their suspicions onto her silence? The debate was relentless. And then, Candace Owens stepped in. Again. She seized the moment and pushed the story to its limits. On her personal page, Candace wrote, "I've spent hours piecing together every detail of Charlie's final days, and I'm convinced there's something much bigger here." Her post spread instantly, gathering millions of views. But as powerful as her words were, there was still no tangible evidence behind them. That didn't stop the internet from splitting in half. One side believed her completely, calling her the only voice brave enough to challenge the silence. The other side called it speculation disguised as truth. warning that grief and outrage were being turned into fuel for clicks. Yet the controversy only grew louder. Each post, each podcast clip, each debate, like oxygen to a growing fire. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Candace and Charlie weren't just colleagues, they were once inseparable. When she joined Turning Point USA in 2017, she called him my brother. They stood together on stage after stage, shaping one of the loudest conservative movements of the decade. But by late 2023, that bond began to fracture. After Candace's outspoken clash with pro-Israel voices during the Gaza conflict, cracks appeared within the movement. By March 2024, she left the Daily Wire, and her path began to diverge sharply from the world she and Charlie once shared. Now, less than a year later, Candace wasn't just a commentator. She had become the centerpiece of a national debate, her name tied to one of the most polarizing stories of the decade. She questioned not only institutions, but even those closest to Charlie, suggesting that there were still pieces of the puzzle no one wants to touch. Then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. Charlie Kirk's funeral. Thousands gathered inside State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. The air was heavy, filled with tributes from figures like Tucker Carlson and Erica Kirk. Cameras rolled, tears fell, but one face was missing: Candace Owens. Her absence was impossible to ignore. Hours later, she quietly confirmed it herself, not with an explanation, but with a cryptic post on X. Attended Mass, took my kids to see the light of the world. Came home, cooked dinner, listened to Tucker share the story of Christ. A perfect day. And Erica. She's such a beautiful example of grace and love in Christ. It was short, polished, and deeply unsettling to some. Thousands at the stadium were mourning in person, while Candace, who once called Charlie her brother, watched from afar. Her message, equal parts serene and strange, only deepened the mystery. Was it peace? Was it defiance? Or just a final statement that she had chosen her own distance from the fire? What caught everyone's attention that day wasn't just who was at the funeral, but who wasn't. Candace Owens, once one of Charlie Kirk's closest allies, was nowhere in sight. While thousands filled the seats of State Farm Stadium, Candace wasn't sitting in the front row. She was at home, watching the service from her living room, headphones on, speaking softly to her audience during a live podcast recorded days earlier. And then came the detail that changed everything. Candace revealed she hadn't even been invited. According to her, the guest list, managed by Erica Kirk and several of Turning Point USA's top donors, had deliberately left her name off. For many watching, the image was haunting. A woman who once called Charlie her brother, who stood beside him for years on stage and in the movement, now left outside the circle, watching from a distance as tributes poured in from those she once called friends. But in true Candace fashion, she didn't let the silence linger. She responded with her trademark mix of sarcasm, wit, and defiance. On social media, she joked about her absence. "There's a 1% chance I'll be there. Bunny, they make it sound like you can buy tickets to a funeral." Then, in a pointed remark that immediately went viral, she added, "When you're questioning the feds, maybe not showing up to a public event they're overseeing isn't the worst idea." Finally, she ended the post with a chillingly casual line: "I'm fine. I'll just listen through my headphones and watch the morning show instead." That one joke, half humor, half bitterness, reignited the internet. Within hours, the hashtag Candace vs. Erica began trending. Comment sections turned into battlefields. Some viewers hailed Candace as the only one brave enough to question the official narrative, calling her a whistleblower standing against powerful silence. Others condemned her, accusing her of turning grief into spectacle, of using a friend's funeral as another platform for controversy. The debate spiraled. Podcasts, talk shows, and YouTube panels picked it apart from every angle. The tension between Candace and Erica becoming a story of its own. And then an even bigger shockwave hit. Several unconfirmed reports began circulating online, claiming that even members of Charlie's own family, including his parents, had begun to express private doubts about how the situation was unfolding. The whispers said they were uneasy about the growing rift between Erica and Candace, and the media firestorm it had created. Whether true or not, Those unverified claims poured gasoline on an already blazing fire. Public conversation turned raw and emotional. People weren't just arguing about politics anymore. They were dissecting loyalty, faith, and the fragile line between truth and exploitation. What started as a memorial had now become a media battlefield, with every word, every absence, and every post feeding a story that refused to die. Those quiet doubts didn't fade. They deepened, spreading like an invisible current, pulling the entire Kirk family into a tense spiral of uncertainty and confrontation. Behind the polished public image, private fractures were starting to show. In the weeks leading up to Charlie's death, sources close to the family shared details that stunned many. They claimed that tension had grown between Charlie's relatives and his wife, Erica. According to these accounts, communication had reportedly become so strained that the family barely spoke directly, relying instead on intermediaries. It was the kind of revelation that shook even longtime supporters. How could a family once known for unity fall into silence right before tragedy struck? As that story spread, public opinion divided even further. On one side, whispers, unverified and unconfirmed, painted a picture of distance and distrust. On the other, Erica's friends and relatives began to speak out fiercely in her defense. They argued that she was being unfairly targeted by what they called an online conspiracy machine. A wave of speculation turning grief into entertainment. Her defenders insisted her silence wasn't proof of guilt or deception. Quite the opposite. It was, they said, the natural reaction of a widow trying to protect her peace in the middle of chaos. To them, Erica's withdrawal from public life wasn't suspicious, it was human. Even voices from within Turning Point USA began weighing in. Pastor Rob McCoy, co-chair of the organization's faith division, and one of Charlie's closest friends, stepped forward with a heartfelt message. But unlike many others, he wasn't there to question or accuse. He came to defend, not just Charlie's memory, but the dignity of what their friendship once stood for. In a post that quickly spread across social media, McCoy wrote, "Charlie was Candace's friend. He never gave space to rumors or gossip. He never spoke ill of her, never turned his back on her. I only wish that, in this season of grief, Candace could be Charlie's friend the way he was hers. He would never have allowed this tragedy to become a weapon." His words hit hard, a mix of sorrow and quiet rebuke. For many, it was the voice of someone still caught between two worlds, mourning a friend while watching that friend's legacy become the center of a public storm. Online, McCoy's message added yet another layer to the debate. Supporters praised his compassion, saying it was a reminder of the faith and loyalty Charlie had preached. Critics, meanwhile, read between the lines, seeing it as a subtle but pointed call for restraint in a media landscape now consumed by rumor and rivalry. And just like that, what began as a family's private mourning had become something far larger, a moral battlefield, where every silence, every post, and every word of loyalty was analyzed under the blinding light of public scrutiny. The pastor's words hit hard, a public rebuke that carried enormous weight, not only because it came from a man of faith, but because it came from one of Charlie's closest spiritual confidants. His message wasn't an attack. It was a plea, a reminder that in moments of tragedy, silence and respect can matter more than any theory or headline. The statement spread fast, and with it, Candace Owens' image began to shift in the public eye. Once hailed as the bold truth-teller, unafraid to challenge powerful institutions, she was now being recast by critics as someone turning heartbreak into spectacle. Commentators accused her of using grief as fuel for attention, of transforming a family tragedy into a stage for her own narrative. For many, that was the line she wasn't supposed to cross. Her words, they said, didn't heal the wound. They ripped it open again. But if anyone thought that would make Candace retreat, they were mistaken. She didn't slow down. She doubled down. Instead of stepping back, Candace leaned even further into the fire. On her next podcast, her tone was sharper, her words more deliberate. She reframed Charlie's death not as an isolated tragedy, but as something far more complex, a political flashpoint. According to Candace, Charlie wasn't just a public figure who lost his life under tragic circumstances. He was, in her words, a target. She suggested his outspoken criticism of U.S. foreign policy and his controversial stance on the Gaza conflict might have made him enemies in powerful places. Then came her warning, cold, direct, and impossible to ignore. Be wary. Be skeptical of anyone who tells you to stop asking questions about what happened to Charlie Kirk. That one sentence hit like gasoline on a smoldering fire. Supporters saw it as proof that Candace was fearless, the only one still daring to speak what others were too afraid to say. But skeptics called it reckless and manipulative, a way to keep the story alive, to keep herself at the center of it all. Whichever side you were on, one thing was undeniable. Candace Owens had escalated the conversation. It was no longer just about one man's death. It had become an ideological collision, a clash of truth, loyalty, and influence, all unfolding in real time. But Candace wasn't finished, not even close. On her personal podcast days later, she dropped what many called a media bomb. In a segment that instantly went viral, Candace claimed that during a heated argument in the Hamptons, just weeks before the tragedy, a powerful billionaire had allegedly threatened Charlie Kirk. Her voice didn't shake as she spoke. "Bill, a man was very angry, and threats were made." Within hours, that clip flooded social media feeds. It wasn't just a statement anymore. It was an earthquake, sending shockwaves through the political world and reigniting every debate that had barely begun to cool. "That's what I heard," Candace said, before adding a line that lit the fuse. "And I would love it if Bill Owens wanted to argue with me about this." With just a few words, she ignited a full-blown media firestorm. Within hours, the backlash hit like a wave. Billionaire investor Bill Owens issued an immediate and emphatic denial. He called Candace's comments baseless, reckless, and dangerously misleading. His statement spread across every major outlet within minutes. Soon after, Andrew Colt, executive producer of The Charlie Kirk Show, publicly condemned the accusation as well, warning that such claims could seriously damage reputations and inflame an already divided audience. But by then, it didn't matter. The spark had already caught. The damage was done. Candace's explosive remarks, despite offering no verifiable evidence, escaped the echo chamber of conservative circles and spilled straight into the mainstream. Suddenly, networks and newspapers that had long ignored her couldn't look away. The story was everywhere, from morning talk shows to primetime political panels. And with that visibility came the question now echoing across every headline. Was Candace Owens defending the legacy of her fallen friend, or dismantling it? The narrative had grown beyond politics. It became a public spectacle, a cultural moment where loyalty, truth, and betrayal blurred together. As the media storm spread, so did the fallout. The tension inside the Kirk family, already fragile, began to fracture even more. Loved ones who were once united in grief now found themselves at the center of a relentless public crossfire. Whispers, headlines, and endless comment threads fueled the chaos. Every new post reignited the debate. Speculation, sorrow, and suspicion merged into one unstoppable current, leaving the Kirk family trapped in the middle of a tragedy that refused to fade. A grieving family can no longer find peace. What began as mourning has turned into a battle zone, grief colliding with public opinion. Inside the Kirk household, two powerful currents are pulling in opposite directions. Another twist could drop at any moment, and when it does, you'll want to be here first.